Alright. Welcome to Sideboard MTG. My name is Eric, and I've got a deck tech for you. Tonight I'm going to be giving you a Grixis mid-range deck, and it's my 75. This is a deck I've been running in my personal LGS, and a lot of people have been asking for my 75. So I'm going to give it to you tonight, and we're going to be running a league with it. So here we go. Hi everybody. If you're watching this, it's pre-recorded, and this is the week that I am moving, so I'm gonna get you some content out, and this is the first of it. This is my Grixis mid-range deck. Alright, so we're just gonna get started here with the land base. There's 4 Aether Hubs, 4 Canyon Sloughs, only 3 Fetid Pools now, because I've actually slightly skewed this deck on the double red, double black side of things versus double blue. So I'm not trying to hit double blue early in the game. I am trying to hit that a little bit later in the game. I do want it by at least a copy by turn 2 or 3, but not necessarily worried about double blue early in the game as most control decks are. So I'm only running 3 of the Fetid Pools, and we're running 3 each of Drowned Catacombs and Dragon Skull Summit. Now, if you did decide to add a little bit more blue into your deck, the first thing I would probably do is just change 1 Canyon Slough over to a Fetid Pools, and that would help a little. If you needed to go further than that, you could maybe take a mountain over for an island, or maybe a swamp, depending on your double black necessity. I personally like my Lost Legacies out of the sideboard, so I like being able to have double black on call. And I really like having my turn 1 black mana to be paired with an Aether Hub, which will allow my Glint Sleeve Siphoner to draw a card on 3, assuming it lives. Now, you may see the 3 Magma Spray and only 1 push here, and that's because my meta has actually been very full of Scrap Heap Scroungers and Kenras. This works really good against red deck. Fatal Push is a good card against red deck. However, I find that Magma Spray works really good against On-Crop Crasher when you don't have a way to, cause a revolt. That at least a Fatal Push can deal with an On-Crop Crasher, and if you need to deal with an Earthshaker Kenra too, it works really well for that as well. Now, against blue-black control and things, where in game 1, where most of your kill spells are dead cards in your hand, you're more than likely more willing to pair this up with one of your other damage based kill spells to deal with the Scarab God, or maybe one of their Torrential Gearhulks or something, to make sure that it doesn't come back later, unless you want it to come back, of course. Now, we do have a Braid main board. Now, the main board of Braid, gold border today. That's cool. Main board Braid here. Only 1 copy. There are a couple more copies in the sideboard, but I only run 1 main board. Now, we do have a lot of damage-based removal. Now, that Magma Spray that works really well with Direfleet Daredevil. Now, I know we're not pulling it out of our graveyard, but Magma Spray paired with damage from Direfleet Devil means that the devil can block 4 toughness creatures without dying, because you can Magma Spray and then it will enter combat with damage already on it. First strike damage will happen, and the Direfleet Daredevil lives. And 4 damage is, or 4 toughness is relevant with as many the Scarab Gods as there are running around. Now, also you could pair this with a much larger spell to kill a much larger creature. I don't have a record yet, but the personal achievement is to have my Direfleet Daredevil outlive a Galta swing. Will it ever happen? I don't know, but if it does, I'll say achievement unlocked. Now, Glint Sleeve Siphoner, I don't think we have to speak much about this. It is clearly becoming the most powerful 2-drop in Standard right now. If you're playing black and you're not playing your Glint Sleeve Siphoners, then you're probably doing something wrong. I know that's challenge accepted to some of you, but I'm going to recommend you don't sleeve up black without throwing some Glint Sleeve Siphoners in there. If you can squeeze the room in, make room for Glint Sleeve Siphoner. The card has been absolutely phenomenal for me. There has been many games where you look down at the scoreboard and it's just chips of two at a time, until all of a sudden, you know, Glorybringer, and it's over. Now, I do run a couple counters main board, and those are Essence Scatter. There's some creatures that it's just easier to deal with if you can just counter them. And Essence Scatter is the best way to do that for me. Now, a lot of these decks you'll see run 4 copies of Whirler Virtuoso, but I find that red deck has calmed down quite a bit, and Whirler Virtuoso is just not as necessary as it might have once been. Now, I do run into Vampires from time to time, and Vampires is a very rough matchup. Especially if it is the version that goes wide. Now, Tokens is also sometimes a rough matchup, but being able to create a flyer is really good. I personally played around with the idea of a Pia in this slot for a little while for that late game, giving you the ability to pump either a Torrential Gearhulk or pump a Whirler token. But as we don't have that many options, it would only be Pia's token that would give us the Flying Thopter. So I'll also played around with the idea of Aethersphere Harvester in this slot, but as I just didn't have enough things early to crew it, it didn't really work for me. So you could play with Aethersphere Harvester if you're going to leave in the Whirler Virtuosos, but if you're not going to leave in the Whirlers, then I wouldn't go there. Now, some of you might have already spied the Vona's Hunger here. This has kind of been my ace in the hole card that has really given me an edge in certain matchups. And for a while, I was running 2 copies of this and only 1 copy of Whirler, and you might actually want to do that if you think Carnage Tyrant is going to be a big part of your meta. Carnage Tyrant is hard to deal with, but this deck can deal with him with a Vona's Hunger, as you can normally deal with pretty much anything else on the battlefield, and then once Carnage Tyrant comes down, you make them sacrifice it, and that's kind of been the plays I've had to make. And the instant speed of Vona's Hunger is extremely relevant with the 2 Gearhulks in the main board. Now, you'll also see that I have 2 copies of Champion of Wits. I am kind of split somewhere between the blue-black mid-range or the blue-black control deck and the Grixis mid-range and the Grixis control deck. We're kind of all 3 of those, and it's kind of worked really, really well for me. So, you know, Champion of Wits, I really like having this card. It's the only real draw in the deck, other than, you know, a copy of Gonti and of course Chandra, Torch of Defiance. Now, when I say it was the only real draw, I guess I'm really leaving off the main reason that makes Glint Sleeve Siphoner great is because you draw cards off of it. When it lives, you draw cards off of it, but the card is phenomenal at actually dealing damage too. You will keep the board clean, and with them only having you know, 1 creature at most most of the time your Glint Sleeve Siphoner is getting through. So if they don't have a removal spell, you're going to do really well with this Glint Sleeve Siphoner. Now, I do run 2 copies of Chandra and 3 copies of Vraska's Contempt. Now, I know a lot of people run 4 copies of Vraska's Contempt, and I have backed off of a 4th copy of Vraska's Contempt. It could be a better spell than the Ravenous Chupacabra, and the Ravenous Chupacabra is, along with the Whirler Virtuoso, the 1 copy of Whirler, I would probably always leave in at least 1 copy, but the Ravenous Chupacabra and the Whirler are my flexible spots, if you will. So if you wanted another copy of Gonti, or maybe a Hostage Taker, Vizier of Many Faces, something like that, even Saheeli Ra would be a very interesting choice in one of these slots. But I have decided to just stick with the Ravenous Chupacabra, as with the Scarab God, it gives me a kill spell on a stick, and I do have a Liliana in the sideboard, and it works really well with that as well. Now, Gonti, I can't say enough about Gonti, and if I was going to change my Ravenous Chupacabra for anything, it would probably just be a 2nd copy of Gonti. I have won more games off of the card that I have stolen with their Gonti than anything else. Like, just, it's amazing how just pulling a counter spell in game 1 against a control deck can just save you so much grief. It's great. It's great. I can't say enough about Gonti. You'll notice that the thumbnail is actually Gonti because he has been the backbone, even though it's one copy main board. Most of my games go along, and when I see him, it just the RNG has been perfect for me, I guess. And Gonti has just done really good things with this deck over the time that I've been playing it. Now, you know, enough can't be said about Chandra either. At this point, we're about to get into, you know, the best cards that you could possibly be playing in the deck, and that's, you know, the Scarab God, Glorybringer, Torrential Gearhulk, Chandra, Vraska's Contempt, Gonti. Like, these are all just amazing cards, and you know, I have to say that I have had so much fun playing this deck, and you know, Glorybringer deals with like everything. Dev said it in his mono red deck. You could have 4 Glorybringers and, you know, 24 lands and whatever else you want, and you would have a decent deck. I only run 3 Glorybringers, but I do run the Scarab God. A lot of times I do get the option to bring him back, and you know, the haste is very, very relevant. An internalized Glorybringer is very much the same as a regular Glorybringer. 4/4 either way, and you know, flying, haste, and can be exerted. So Glorybringer really, really good. When you're bringing him back with the Scarab God, you know, only 4 mana, so it's even better. I can't say enough about running the Scarab God. I never really played around with 3 or 4 copies of the deck. I actually always felt that the deck wasn't necessarily the Scarab God deck, but yet it is the Scarab God deck. It is very much the Scarab God deck and has very good targets of my own, not necessarily just the targets of my opponent. Now, because we have the Scarab God and we have the Torrential Gearhulk, that does allow us to go into a much you know, later game and get more use out of our Vraska's Contempts. Another reason that I only played the 3 Vraska's Contempts is because I have the option of pulling those back, and because of those Gearhulks, I've put a little more emphasis on cards that are instant speed, and you'll see that here in the sideboard. I do want to say one more thing about Direfleet Daredevil. It is very common for the opponent to use a kill spell on your turn 2. Like, say you're on the play, you'll play Glint Sleeve Siphoner, they'll use a kill spell, a 1 mana kill spell, and then they will play their 2-drop. On turn 3, you can play land, play Direfleet, use their 1 mana kill spell most of the time to kill their own 2-drop. So just that curve, following up behind Glint Sleeve Siphoner, has been great, but more times than not, it's a Vraska's Contempt that you're pulling out of the opponent's graveyard. Remember, when you do pull and cast that card, it is exiled, and they will no longer have the option of casting it. So now we're going to move on into the sideboard. Now, my sideboard's actually extremely simple. I've got a couple cards for control here: Liliana, Angrath, Vizier of Many Faces, another answer to Carnage Tyrant. Gonti, also, you know, another answer to Carnage Tyrant. Again, I bring this card in so many matchups. Fiery Cannonade was not originally in the deck list, but there were a lot of tokens decks and vampires decks. Now, you might want to run something else, but I find that I can fire this off early, and because it's instant speed, I have no real fear that I'm not going to get a chance to cast it again later. So I do like the Fiery Cannonade. So you know, you take out a Lord, everything else drops back down. It has the 2 damage on it. If Golden Demise would be good, Fiery Cannonade is good. I know we don't have any pirates. It's not going to save us from, you know, a pirates deck, but against most pirates decks, we can win for 1 most of their pirates. Now, negate here. Can't say enough about negate. Having your sideboard negates is an absolute must. Abrade the same way. Godpharaoh's Gift is still a big deal. And Crook of Condemnation. Now this card has actually won me most of my matchups against the Scarab God decks. Crook of Condemnation has been absolutely terrific. I have found that I have started to bring it in against The red-green monsters decks. It works really good against the Phoenix and the Kinras, just allowing you to remove their late game during your mid to late game is just terrific. I can't say enough about the Crook. The more you play it, the more games you're going to find that you just want the Crook. And it's really easy against some of the aggro decks to actually shave some of the top end of your curve, bring in a Crook or two Crooks in those matchups. You don't always want two Crooks, but in some of those matchups you want to make sure that you see it early, because you know what's going to happen. The Kinras are coming down, and if you don't have your magma sprays, you're going to have to harness lighten them, and you're going to want to eat those by turn 6. So that's just kind of one of those things. You got to make sure you keep those, the graveyards clean. Worst case scenario, you can always wipe the graveyard, and then there is another Crook in your graveyard or in your deck that you can go get. Angrath has been absolutely terrific against the approach decks. I have found that Angrath he demands a cast out or an Ixalan's binding, and even though they know there's only one Angrath or maybe two Angrath in the entire deck, Ixalan's bindings will still happen because they can't afford to lose their cards. I also found that Angrath was really good against the New Perspectives deck. I was able to get my Angrath down on the play and kept him from having enough cards to go off with his New Perspectives, which was very, very handy, considering I don't have other discard, and it allowed me to get to my negates and then I was able to move on and defeat the deck. So very, very interesting plays here. So I really like this deck. I hope you guys like the deck, and we're gonna get to a league coming up right after this.